A grand event, which appears to be a prince's graduation party, but the mood is tense. Someone is being accused of a terrible betrayal and is told they were trusted completely, while another person tries to stop the confrontation, reminding them it is a celebration. The confrontation is between an angry blonde prince and a calm, fan-holding noblewoman named Laetitia Cherriere. The prince accuses Laetitia of harassing another woman, Miss Anna McLaugh, who stands nearby looking upset. The prince angrily tells Laetitia not to play dumb and says he won't accept "I don't remember" as an excuse. When the prince mentions there are witnesses, Laetitia calmly replies, "Is that so?" She then stuns everyone by smiling and openly admitting she was harassing Anna, boldly asking what the problem is with that. The prince is shocked by her inhumanity and says she has changed in the 2 years she was away, while Laetitia internally observes how focused he is on that woman. Laetitia looks down on the prince, telling him he missed the point. She dismisses Anna as just a baroness, while proudly stating that she is the duke's daughter and the crown prince's fiancée. She insists her actions are her own business and that he should be praising her for driving away insects from his side, which causes the prince to yell at her to shut up. Following her shocking words, the prince turns his back on Laetitia and walks over to Anna. He then makes a dramatic public announcement, declaring that he is discarding his engagement to Laetitia right in that very place. The crowd erupts in whispers, shocked that Lady Laetitia could be such a bully. A graphic explains that Laetitia is the eldest daughter of the Cherriere house, a prestigious family that has produced the country's prime minister for generations. As the crowd reacts, Laetitia thinks to herself that she never had any feelings for the prince anyway. In fact, Laetitia is secretly thrilled. She reveals in her inner monologue that she had been engaged to Prince Dion, the first crown prince, and had spent 11 years deliberately working hard to make everyone hate her. Her efforts to be seen as discriminatory while studying as a noble finally succeeded, as the prince himself asked to break the engagement, freeing her from the tedious socializing she hated. Laetitia reflects that being empress would have been a disaster. Just as an attendant tells her it's time for an announcement from His Majesty the King, a sudden commotion breaks out. Laetitia recognizes her father's voice shouting for a doctor, and someone announces that the Majesty has fallen unconscious. Laetitia turns in shock to see the king collapsed on the floor. Panic ensues as people crowd the king, begging him to open his eyes and desperately asking where the healer is. At that moment, strange voices begin floating in Laetitia's head, giving modern medical advice like heart massage and perform CPR, making Laetitia wonder if she is going mad. These voices trigger a flood of vivid, unfamiliar memories. Laetitia sees flashes of someone leaving a hospital, a strong desire to save lives and support patients, and a memory of recovering from a serious illness thanks to doctors and nurses. The memories become clearer, showing her passing a national exam and being congratulated. She remembers becoming a nurse, being assigned to a ward, and vowing to become a full-fledged professional. This is tragically contrasted with a memory of a sudden relapse of an illness. She recalls having this disease since childhood and never thinking it would relapse. The final memory is of her dying as a nurse, filled with regret and wishing she had more things she wanted to do. Back in the present, Laetitia has a stunning realization. These are memories from her past life. She understands that she has been reborn and that she was once a nurse in a place called Japan on Earth. She is snapped out of this revelation by her father's desperate cries to the unconscious king. She sees her father shaking the king's body, while the prince tries to reassure him that a healer will be there soon. Now armed with her past life's medical knowledge, Laetitia knows shaking him is dangerous. She startles her father by ordering him to stop and to lay His Majesty flat on the floor. She quickly asks how long it's been, knowing that only a few minutes have passed and she must act. Knowing she must perform CPR, Laetitia kneels beside the king. She quickly checks his carotid artery and finds no pulse, no breathing, and no consciousness. Realizing his life is on the line, she tells her confused father to hurry and find a clean cloth, thinking to herself that healing magic alone only restores stamina and won't restart a heart. She tells her father to move and quickly finds the correct position on the king's sternum, just above the xiphoid process. She knows she must press down hard and yells again for someone to bring the clean cloth. The prince runs over, shouting angrily and demanding to know what she is doing to His Majesty. Laetitia completely ignores him, focusing on her compressions and silently pleading for the king to come back and to live. Her father, His Excellency, steps between Laetitia and the prince, telling him to leave this to his daughter and that she will take full responsibility. He thinks to himself that this is the first time he has ever seen his daughter look so serious, while Letitia yells again, asking if the cloth is ready yet. A maid finally rushes forward with the cloth. Letitia thanks her and places it over the king's mouth. She has a brief, wry thought that while this is technically her first kiss, it doesn't count in this situation. She then leans down and begins to perform rescue breaths. The entire crowd, including the prince, looks on in absolute, stunned horror. Letitia continues her rhythm, pushing with her hands and then giving breaths, her mind focused with the single thought, "Come back alive." Suddenly, the king's eyes fly open as he takes a sharp gasp of air. Letitia pulls back, smiling in relief, as the prince shouts that His Majesty is awake. The king looks around in confusion, and Letitia's father stares at his own hand and then at his daughter, completely speechless. Letitia, blushing with relief and exhaustion, sees the healers finally arriving. Believing the king is now all right and that she can leave the rest to them, the adrenaline fades, and she promptly collapses to the floor. As she falls, a mysterious dark-haired man watches her, noting she is so tired. Letitia's very last thought as she loses consciousness is that she really wants to drink a beer. The man smiles, apparently hearing her thought, and wonders to himself what beer could possibly be. Dion, the first prince who broke off his engagement to Letizia after being horrified by her behavior. Next is Anna, an innocent girl with a secret who has caught Dion's interest. Then there is Letizia's maid, Suzanne, who is described as perfect and absolutely loyal, though she finds Letizia difficult to handle. A man named Christophe is shown, but his details are a mystery. We also see Claude, the second prince, who is known in public as an extravagant playboy. Finally, the main character Letizia is introduced as a former nurse reincarnated as a duke's daughter who loves eating delicious food and drinking sake wine. She would love to just indulge her desires all the time but seems unable to find the opportunity. The story begins at the Charlier family home, where Letizia is happily drinking wine in the middle of the day, exclaiming what a luxury it is. Her maid, Suzanne, watches and asks her ladyship to please be more moderate. Letizia, holding up an empty bottle, cheerfully ignores this and calls out to Suzanne, asking her to be a dear and bring more wine. Letizia, now named, recalls that after the incident at the graduation party, she had collapsed from fatigue and didn't wake up until the next day. As soon as she woke up, her father called for her. In the present, Suzanne expresses her disbelief, pointing out that Letizia is supposed to be under house arrest. Letizia simply confirms that this is true. A flashback shows her father asking her if Prince Dion has called off the engagement and if it's true that the cause was her mistreatment of Lady Anna. Letizia solemnly confirms that this is indeed true. Her father sighs heavily, lamenting how regrettable this is after all the time she spent working so hard. He then thinks back to yesterday and asks her just what sort of procedure she used on His Majesty, as the healers said they had never heard of such a treatment. An image shows an alarmed person. Letizia, looking away, claims it was just something that came to mind and that she probably read it in a book a long time ago. Her father continues, saying that while she did manage to save the king's life, her part in the broken engagement cannot be ignored. He decides that spending any further time in the capital would be taxing for her. He tells her to use this time to rest and heal her mind and body. Therefore, starting tomorrow, she is to be under house arrest at their duchy's residence. Letizia's eye twitches as she thinks to herself that she is no longer the prince's fiancée and has been working hard since she was young, so it should be fine if she relaxed for a little while. A close-up shows her eye twitching as she questions the phrase, "a little?" It has now been a week since she returned home, and she has been relaxing every day by drinking, sleeping, and eating. Suzanne confronts her, asking what this little while she spoke of is. She explains that the servants and she are concerned and warns her that wine alone isn't healthy, asking her to drink water too. Suzanne also mentions that her ladyship seems to have become a completely different person. Letizia's heart thumps as she laughs nervously, suggesting it's probably just because her engagement was cancelled. Suzanne, however, just stares at her suspiciously. Suzanne presses on, pointing out that her ladyship also saved His Majesty's life using rare medical knowledge. Letizia thinks to herself that Suzanne is too sharp, just as expected of her exclusive maid, for noticing such small things. Suzanne adds that in her 10 years of service, she has rarely heard Letizia use casual speech and wonders if her inner self has changed without her noticing. Letizia realizes her 30-year-old memories are affecting her speech and mannerisms more than she thought. This change happened on that day when she regained the memories of her past life. She reflects on her old life, where her life and dreams were cut short. She was ill as a child and was often taken care of by nurses. As an adult, her illness returned, and she eventually lost her life. While it is painful to recall the fear and sadness she felt on her deathbed, remembering those nurses has helped her find a new life goal. Her new goal is to live the ultimate leisure lifestyle. She recalls being too busy in her past life to do anything she wanted. Now, she remembers the taste of drinking sake wine during the day, the satisfying taste of delicious food, and the happiness that comes from spending free time doing absolutely nothing. She giggles to herself. Letizia thinks about her current problem. She is under house arrest, which she considers lucky as it's away from prying eyes. She had been so busy until now, even more so than in her past life. She knows she can't tell anyone that she remembers her past life, as even she barely believes it. She decides to refrain from any more actions that stand out and to dispel any suspicions about her. Now, she will finally live her life the way she wants. She turns to Suzanne, apologizing for causing her worry, admitting she luxuriated a bit too much and will endeavor to take care from now on. Suzanne replies that this is for the best but mentions that it hasn't been easy, as they've had to remake all the dresses with their lady in this state. Letizia freezes, horrified, and asks, "Oh my, did you just notice?" She thinks about the effects of the past week's non-stop eating frenzy and internally screams, "No." A few days later, Letizia is seen walking but quickly tries to stop, declaring she has walked enough for today. She wheezes, complaining that her feet hurt, she's so thirsty, and she really just wants to stop. Suzanne, however, firmly tells her ladyship that they've only been walking a short time and she must persevere to lose weight. Suddenly, Letizia looks up and spots an unfamiliar coach. She asks Suzanne about it, stating that there were no visits planned for today. A butler named Donnie runs up, addressing, "My lady." Letizia asks who their unexpected visitor is, and Donnie replies, "Yes, about that." Inside, a man sits on a sofa, thinking that the infamous lady has finally returned. He observes that she is looking as well and elegant as ever. Letizia and Suzanne enter the room, and Letizia recognizes the guest as Prince Claude. Prince Claude, who is already seated, invites her to sit and join him. Letizia stiffly replies, "Yes, Your Highness." Letizia wonders what such a person would want from her. She identifies him as the kingdom's second prince, Claude Alan Furel, the brother of her ex-fiancé, Prince Dion. She recalls that rumors say Claude leads a prolific nightlife and is a notorious playboy, the complete opposite evil prince compared to the model Prince Dion. Claude states that the reason he is there is to ask her something. He then directly accuses her, asking, "You orchestrated events so that my brother would break off the engagement, didn't you?" Letizia gulps, shocked by the question. She denies it, claiming it was her own shameful conduct toward Lady Anna that was the cause. Claude counters, asking, if so, why did it seem she wasn't actually seriously harassing Miss Anna? He explains that whenever she chastised Anna, a friend would conveniently pass by to console her. He adds that when Letizia poured water on her, a student with good water magic skills would appear to dry her off. It seemed there was always someone providing aftercare service after each of her altercations. Stunned, Letizia listens as Claude continues, stating that furthermore, the students who supported Anna can all be traced back to him. Letizia tries to laugh it off nervously, asking why she would want to break off her engagement in such a way. Claude simply says, "Even so." He smirks, revealing that this was also under investigation. He asks if perhaps she noticed that her engagement might very well spark a civil war. He explains that there are 4 duchies in the country, including the Duchy of Charlier and the other 3 dukes' territories. Claude explains that for many years, the power of the 4 reigning families has been equal. However, Letizia's marriage to his brother would shift the power balance in her family's favor. Such a thing would not be stood for by the other 3 dukes, who would surely attempt a civil war. He concludes that she tried to prevent this by abandoning her engagement. Letizia's internal monologue confirms this is what Prince Claude believes. She supposedly noticed the signs of civil unrest when she visited the territories of the 3 dukes. In reality, she noticed because of the confectionery. She thought it was strange that hard, unsweetened confectionery was being mass-produced and sold in all their territories, and that it was all baked goods that could be preserved for a long time. She recalls that when she asked, people told her the Duke was very fond of these confections. Suspicious of this trend, she started investigating the 3 duchies. She soon found out it wasn't just the strange confectionery, large amounts of food, human resources, and weapons were being collected, as if they were preparing for battle. She had wanted to tell her father but feared it might divide the nation into factions. So, she kept it a secret and chose instead to break off her engagement with Prince Dion. Claude points out the big hole in her plan. He argues that even if she thinks this solves everything, the country will still be led to civil war if his brother marries any woman other than her. Letizia is surprised but realizes that this is true. Claude states that she already knows he is right. Letizia tries to argue that this is rude to say about Prince Dion and his potential spouse, but internally she agrees that only she would be the right choice. She thinks to herself that it's better to avoid the civil war she sees right in front of her, but Claude dismisses this as mere conjecture about the future. He describes Prince Dion as a person with a strong sense of justice who is very inflexible. He insists Dion needs a queen who can support him from behind and correct his mistakes. Letizia internally agrees, thinking that although she doesn't want to admit it, she really is the best choice, as she isn't spoiled and was strictly educated to be by his side. Claude then asks if she finally admits it. Defeated, Letizia says, well, yes, conceding that she can't deny anything since he found out so much. She asks him about his job. He explains that it is his job to investigate any powers that might oppose the royal family, in order to support his father and his elder brother when he becomes king. He reveals that he puts on the bad prince persona as a means to do his work, even if it means acting like a complete buffoon. Letizia is surprised by this. Letizia acknowledges that the royal family has such a person and that she thought her plan was flawless. She asks what His Highness intends to do now. She states that she has no intention of doing anything further, as she already fulfilled her plan, and suggests he can't have come just to accuse her. Claude stands up and says he just thinks it is regrettable to lose someone with her intellect and perceptiveness. He then walks over, grabs Letizia's hand, and makes a declaration. He, Claude Alain Furel, wishes to take Lady Letizia Charlier as his wife. Claude kneels before the stunned Letizia. He asks her to please do him this honor and walk with him on the path to rid their country of its ugliness. All Letizia can do is stammer, "What? Wah," as she mentally screams, "What?" Prince Claude kneeling and asking for Lady Letizia Charlier's hand in marriage. Letizia is completely stunned, her heart pounding in her chest as she stammers his name. Suddenly, she stands up and throws something at his face, yelling, "Take this!" Blinding attack. Claude is startled by her action. Letizia angrily declares that just because she's heartbroken doesn't mean she'll marry someone who just shows up out of nowhere. She also points out that as the second prince, marrying him would still lead to a civil war in the end. Claude, recovering, just looks baffled and says her sudden personality change is really creeping him out. Claude then bursts into laughter. Letizia, flustered, realizes her past self is showing through with phrases like blinding attack, and worries this could be seen as an offense against the crown. Claude, however, just laughs harder, telling her she's funny and that he likes her, which only confuses her more. He then flops back onto the sofa, casually admitting that his proposal was a lie. He explains that he just wanted to draw out her true self, so he tested her. He finds it amusing that a noble lady from a powerful ducal house would yell, "Take this," and try to blind him like some brat. This makes Letizia angry, and she retorts that testing someone with a marriage proposal makes him a heartless scoundrel and a failure as a human being. Claude just laughs and says, "My bad," explaining that he wants to build a partnership with her precisely because she is both clear-headed and has the courage to do such things. Letizia questions what he means by a partnership. Claude turns serious and explains that even if her plan to break her engagement prevents a civil war, the country is still likely to decline. He clarifies that he has no interest in the throne, but as a member of the royal family, he is worried about where the country is headed and wants to borrow her strength to change the future. Letizia silently considers this, acknowledging that while she may be smarter than the average person, she doesn't have the power or the knowledge to fix an entire country on her own. She asks if what he's saying is really true. Claude tells her not to sulk, while Letizia mutters that she's just a duke's daughter who reacts stupidly when tested and isn't sure how much help she can be. Claude reminds her that she saved his father, the king, with medical techniques he had never seen before, and he presumes she must have even more knowledge. Letizia reflects internally that her past life was indeed in a world with much more advanced culture and science, and with that knowledge, she might be able to prevent the country's decline. The problem is that this world is very restrictive about class and gender, and she cannot reveal her past life memories to anyone. Deciding to negotiate, Letizia asks if the country's decline would be a gradual process, thinking that she could just live out her days lazily in the meantime. She states that she won't help with such a huge task without any compensation. She doesn't want to sacrifice her future and asks what she would get out of cooperating. Claude asks if she is being serious, and Letizia confirms she is, demanding a satisfactory amount of compensation. Claude offers something equal in value to the life of a duke's daughter. He extends his hand, pledging to use all his power to grant her anything she wants once her wishes are fulfilled, asking if that will suffice. Letizia slams her hand down on a nearby table, accepting his terms with a simple, understood. With the deal struck, Letizia formally agrees to work with Prince Claude. He chuckles and thanks her, and they agree to protect the country together. Letizia internally cheers, "I did it." She immediately fantasizes about her reward, lounging in a chair with wine and sweets. She thinks that if she can just prevent the country's decline, Prince Claude will guarantee her super-duper lazy lifestyle. She reasons that a powerful country will have a higher standard of living, which means access to even more delicious alcohol and sweets. Besides, she doesn't actually want to see the country decline. She pumps her fist, motivated to do her best for both the country and her future life of leisure. However, some days later, Letizia is completely buried under a mountain of paperwork. She screams in frustration, wondering why she has to do all the paperwork for managing the Cherriere territory. She feels like a horse being led by a carrot on a stick. She recalls that after Claude left, she explained the situation to her maid, Suzanne, who advised her to start by learning about her own territory. Suzanne had called it an easy job and motivated her with the promise of a delicious lunch. Letizia gloomily thinks, "And thus, I tried working." She struggles with the endless pile of documents and asks if Donnie, the butler, can help, since he was doing it before. Donnie respectfully declines, explaining that he was only acting as a representative and cannot step in now that she, the lady, has returned. Letizia shrieks, realizing this isn't easy at all and there's no time for her to be lazy. Suzanne just comments that it's a good learning experience. Letizia has to agree that it's true. The paperwork has taught her for the first time about the many problems in her territory, like beasts destroying crops and epidemics killing people every year. Letizia reflects that solving these problems is the first step to protecting the country. The door opens, and Prince Claude walks in. He spots her at the desk and remarks with surprise, "What? You're working?" Letizia snaps at him that it's rude to enter without knocking. He tells her not to be so uptight, saying he came to report something. When she asks what it is, he warns her it's not good news. He holds up a letter, informing her that his father, the king, refuses to acknowledge the annulment of her engagement to his brother. Letizia is so shocked her pen clatters onto the desk as she yells, "What?" Claude explains that the king has been telling everyone that Letizia is a goddess of Alenflau, who saved his life, and it seems he valued her engagement to Dion far more than they realized. Letizia panics, wondering where this goddess story came from. Claude warns her that this high praise is dangerous. Because the king refuses to annul the engagement, her existence remains a threat to the other three ducal families, the ducal trio. He clenches his fist, revealing that the trio has already begun to make its moves. Since she is in the countryside with light security, they are planning to assassinate her. Letizia is terrified by this news. Claude tells her he is assigning her a bodyguard and calls for a man named Christophe to enter. A man steps forward and introduces himself as Christophe Lanvin. Claude explains that Christophe was the leader of the Knights' Order in the capital, but Claude made him quit because he thought he'd be the perfect bodyguard. Letizia is shocked and asks if it's really okay for the leader to leave the capital. Claude dismisses her concern, saying the order has other talented people. Letizia protests that she doesn't need someone of his rank, but Claude insists it's a necessary precaution, especially against the ducal trio's private armies. Christophe then interrupts, asking if he might make a comment. Letizia politely tells him to go on. Christophe says he understands her apprehension but assures her he accepted the position of his own free will. He then proposes that she make her decision after he tests him. Letizia is confused by this. Christophe explains that he has heard a village in her territory is being plagued by beasts. Letizia confirms this is true and says she was just about to organize an extermination team. Christophe then requests that she allow him to handle the extermination all by himself. Letizia is stunned that he wants to go alone. He argues it's a good deal, she solves a problem at no cost, and he gets to demonstrate his strength. Letizia hesitates, wondering if he has an ulterior motive. She admits that having a bodyguard would be reassuring, but she's suspicious why someone so skilled would want the job. She thinks that while she would be grateful to have the beasts dealt with, the situation is worrying. She decides this is a good opportunity to see his true intentions and skills in action. She agrees to his offer but states that she and Suzanne will accompany him as observers. Christophe smiles and accepts. Christophe bows deeply, vowing to meet her expectations. Letizia, with Suzanne beside her, announces, "All right then, let us set off." In the background, Prince Claude winks. The scene shifts to a forest, where the group has arrived to begin the beast extermination mission. Letizia and her maid Suzanne riding in a carriage, approaching their destination, Fournet Village. Letizia looks out the window and observes that the village is not as far from the residence as she had imagined. She thinks to herself that it is a pity Prince Claude could not join them. A brief flashback shows Prince Claude being physically dragged away by an attendant, all while protesting that he was the one who introduced Christophe to her. Back in the present, Letizia reflects that while she finds Claude's need to show off strange, she does appreciate all the arrangements he is making for her. Once they arrive, they meet Christophe inside a building. He expresses his gratitude to Letizia for letting him handle the beast extermination. Letizia, seated on a sofa with Suzanne standing nearby, asks if he will truly be all right all by himself. Christophe confirms he will be fine and reveals that he has some knowledge of magic. This news surprises Letizia, who then asks him what type of magic he uses. Christophe, sitting across from her, explains that he uses non-elemental magic. Letizia initially associates non-elemental magic with healing magic. Christophe clarifies the difference. He explains that most magic users have an affinity for one of the 5 elements: fire, wind, water, earth, or light, with the light affinity being extremely rare. He correctly notes that Letizia herself has a water affinity, which she confirms, though she says it is nothing special. Christophe adds that there are other forms of non-elemental magic besides healing, but they are not widely taught at the Nobles Academy. To demonstrate her own power, Letizia conjures a tiny bit of water above her hand. She explains that her power is rather common and that she has heard of talented magic users who can create large water dragons. Christophe contrasts this with his own abilities, explaining that non-elemental magic is unique to each person and stems from personal, innate talents, rather than an elemental affinity. Letizia finds this new concept of innate talents interesting. Christophe gives healing magic as an example, saying it is an innate talent for lending magical power to increase another's healing rate. He reveals that his own innate talent is to strengthen his body. To demonstrate, he takes out a gold coin and holds it between his fingers. As he concentrates, power crackles around his hand, and the coin suddenly shatters into pieces. Letizia and Suzanne are both visibly shocked, and Letizia trembles, commenting on his incredible strength. Christophe calmly explains that it was this non-elemental body-strengthening magic that got him scouted and allowed him to rise to the rank of leader of the Knights Order. As their carriage finally arrives at the village, Letizia is still processing this, even imagining him doing push-ups with a single finger. Upon arriving, Letizia observes that the village is very quiet, with ravaged fields and gloomy villagers. The village chief bows deeply to her, expressing his gratitude that she accepted their request to exterminate the beasts. Letizia replies that she is glad to help. The villagers explain that the beasts have a nest in a nearby mountain and that guides can lead the way. As Letizia prepares to go, Christophe steps in and says he will accompany the guides alone, telling her there is no need for her to come. Letizia is surprised, reminding him she came as an observer. Christophe insists, explaining that the mountain paths are dangerous and the beasts are ferocious. While he is confident he can protect her, he does not want to risk a worst-case scenario. Letizia understands that she would only get in the way and agrees to wait in the village with Suzanne. Christophe thanks her and, placing a hand on his sword, vows to return with good news. He then heads into the forest, where screeches can already be heard. Deep in the woods, Christophe unleashes his power, cutting down several large, boar-like beasts with a single slash. The creatures fall to the ground, defeated. The village guides are stunned, whispering that his ability to defeat so many beasts in an instant is amazing. Christophe scans his surroundings, wondering if that was all of them. Just then, more roars and howls echo from deeper in the forest, and Christophe realizes there are still more enemies. Sometime later, a massive beast, the leader, crashes to the ground. The guides are in awe, noting he took it down with just one slice and wondering if he used magic. As Christophe sheathes his sword, he tells the men that with the leader defeated, the beast should no longer plague the village. The guides cheer and are eager to return with the good news. Christophe briefly pauses as if he heard something, but then dismisses it as his imagination. Back in the village, a joyous celebration erupts, with villagers feasting and drinking. The chief raises his mug, proposing a toast to Sir Christophe, who bravely exterminated all the beasts. The guides excitedly tell Letizia and Suzanne that Christophe's swordsmanship was on a completely different level, so fast they could hardly see him move. Letizia watches as the villagers happily surround Christophe, who is laughing and drinking with them. She remarks to Suzanne that he has become a big hit, and Suzanne agrees it is to be expected since he saved them all. The village chief approaches Letizia to thank her, saying their fields will now be safe. Letizia humbly deflects the praise, stating that it is a lord's duty to protect their citizens and that their thanks should go to Christophe, who did the actual defeating. The chief thanks her for her consideration and insists that she and her party enjoy the celebration. Letizia happily takes a drink, thinking the alcohol is delicious and that she can relax more here than at the mansion, especially since the kind villagers keep bringing her food and drinks. As she watches the happy villagers, Letizia thinks it's all thanks to Christophe. She had worried he was being forced into this by Prince Claude or had some ulterior motive, but that no longer seems to be the case. Recognizing his skill, she decides it would be very helpful to have him stay and resolves to officially ask him to be her bodyguard. She stands and starts to walk toward him, but just as she gets close, Christophe suddenly wobbles on his feet. Before anyone can react, Christophe collapses to the ground. Letizia cries out his name in shock, while the surrounding villagers ask what happened, saying he fell out of nowhere. Letizia rushes to his side and kneels, trying to get his attention. She checks his pulse and sees his face is pasty white, and his pulse is weak. As she tries to understand what happened, a woman suddenly screams that someone from her family has collapsed as well. Letizia looks up in horror as she hears a plate clatter and sees another person fall. Looking around, Letizia sees more and more people collapsing throughout the village. Another woman screams for help as her relative falls, and a glass crashes. Letizia's heart pounds in fear, her face pale. She wonders if it's an illness, a magic spell, or a curse, or even an assassin sent by the ducal trio. Overcome with panic, she staggers and tells Suzanne they need to run. Just as she's about to flee, her head throbs, and she mentally scolds herself. She realizes this is no time to be scared. A voice in her head, which she recognizes as her past self, reminds her that she knows exactly what to do when people collapse. It reminds her of her experience with patients whose conditions suddenly worsened. She forces herself to calm down, deciding to first find the cause and then stabilize the patients. She wills herself to move and start with what she can do. The voice in her head encourages her, "Do it, Letizia," telling her she is the only one she can rely on. She squeezes her arm to focus and immediately returns to assessing Christophe. His breathing is shallow and his pulse is weak. His hands are cold, signaling poor circulation. She notes that she can still find his wrist pulse, which means his blood pressure is holding and he's not in shock yet. However, she's frustrated because she still doesn't know the cause, which means she doesn't know how to treat him. She feels a wave of despair, thinking that even with her past life memories, her abilities are limited, and she may not be able to save Christophe or the others. In that moment, a villager screams in pure terror, yelling that it is the Life Eater. The man panics, crying that he doesn't want to be eaten and that they all have to run, or they will be eaten too. Kneeling on the ground, Letizia hears this and latches onto the mysterious, terrifying name, Life Eater. In chaos as panicked villagers run past the collapsed bodies of their friends and family, screaming that it's the end of the village. A terrified man yells about the Life Eater, a term Letizia, kneeling in shock, has never heard. Another man grabs her, telling her that people are collapsing from a disease that will spread and kill everyone. He warns her that if she wants to live, her only option is to abandon the village and run away. As Letizia looks around, she sees that the only people who haven't fled are the families of the victims, who are weeping over their loved ones. A young girl cries, begging her collapsed father to wake up. Letizia realizes this Life Eater must be a contagious disease that can spread rapidly from person to person, but she can't think of any illness that could strike so suddenly. Determined to find answers, Letizia decides to examine other victims. She approaches a grieving woman, but the woman angrily shouts at her to leave her husband alone in his last moments, saying he is going to die for sure. Shaken, Letizia steps back. Her maid, Suzanne, rushes to her side to ask if she is all right. Letizia, clenching her fist, says she refuses to quit. She observes that the other victims have the same symptoms as Christophe, which means if she can find a way to save him, she can save everyone else. She tells Suzanne they must return to Christophe to find clues for a treatment. Back at Christophe's side, Letizia sits with renewed resolve, telling Suzanne they are going to do this. She declares that she cannot call herself the daughter of the Lord if she abandons the people of her territory and she vows to save them all. She calms her breathing and begins to logically sort through the information. The disease spreads quickly and its symptoms appear suddenly. She theorizes it might be an unknown substance in the bloodstream causing an allergic reaction that damages the central nervous system, but that wouldn't be contagious. She considers other possibilities, concluding that the one thing they all have in common is that the affliction travels through the bloodstream. This gives her an idea. Since the central nervous system commands the body's blood flow, it might be possible to reroute toxins or allergens. She asks Suzanne for a clean cloth and a magic recovery medicine. When Suzanne, holding the items, asks what she plans to do, Letizia instructs her to cover her mouth and nose with the cloth to protect herself from infection, noting that masks are not a concept in this world. Letizia then announces she will treat Christophe using her water magic, much to Suzanne's surprise. Letizia explains that while she can't produce much water, her past life memories gave her a new idea. Instead of creating water, she might be able to manipulate the moisture that already exists. Since blood is part liquid, she theorizes she can use her magic to control it. She places her hand over Christophe's chest to begin that a light shines from Letizia's hand, and Suzanne watches in awe as a faint light also begins to glow from Christophe's body. Letizia is amazed to find that as her magic spreads, she can actually sense the flow of his blood. She focuses, searching for the cause of the illness. Suddenly she finds it, a filth, mixed in with his blood. She identifies that the substance is mixed into the liquid plasma. She wonders if she can use her water magic to manipulate the blood and force the filth out. She slowly and carefully increases the amount of magic she is pouring into him. Just as she's working, she cries out in pain. She realizes with horror that the filth from his blood is transferring to her, and a painful chill shoots through her body. Suzanne cries out in alarm, but Letizia knows she must get the substance out of herself immediately. She forcefully expels the dirty liquid from her own body, splashing a dark puddle onto the floor. Panting heavily, she warns a shocked Suzanne not to touch the substance, explaining it's the filth from Christophe's blood. As Letizia puts on her own cloth mask, she looks at Christophe and sees his breathing has already become calm and steady. She thinks with relief that he will be okay. Feeling dizzy from the effort, Letizia notes that Christophe's complexion is improving. She asks Suzanne for the magic recovery medicine, stating that she is now going to treat the other villagers. Suzanne protests, pointing out that her lady is clearly unwell, but Letizia insists she is fine. She quickly drinks the potion, though she admits to herself that saving just one person completely depleted her magic and she's struggling to stay conscious. But as she sees the families of the other victims, desperate and hoping for a miracle, she is reminded of her own suffering from illness in her past life. She grabs the potion, tells a grieving man she can save his relative, and prepares to continue. Letizia thinks of the villagers' fear of death and knows she cannot leave them. A bright light envelopes her as she moves to treat the others, determined to save everyone. Sometime later, she staggers, and Suzanne has to catch her. Letizia gasps that she isn't feeling well, realizing she has pushed herself too hard. All around them, the previously collapsed villagers are sitting up and recovering, chattering in amazement that everyone is getting better. One man comments that even a healer from the capital probably couldn't have done this. Letizia, though coughing and weak, is just relieved the treatment worked. As a villager thanks her, he mentions that the person next to him just spit something out. Suzanne looks at the object on the floor and wonders if it's a larva. Letizia, losing consciousness, warns Suzanne that the bug may be dangerous, and she collapses. As she falls, the recovering villagers, awestruck, begin to call her a goddess. Letizia blinks awake to find herself in a comfortable bed. She is confused to see Prince Claude, a healthy-looking Christophe, and a tearful Suzanne at her bedside. Suzanne cries out that her lady is finally awake and informs her that she has been asleep for 3 days. Letizia's first thought is for Christophe, who assures her he is feeling perfectly well thanks to her. As Suzanne bustles off to get her food, Prince Claude explains that they reported the Life Eater outbreak under her family's name, which greatly surprised both the king and her father, Patrice. Claude admits he was also stunned that she managed to stop a plague that no one else could. Claude continues, reporting that they investigated the larva a villager had spit out. They are now certain it is the cause of the Life Eater. Suzanne, returning, adds that she had them investigate it because Letizia seemed so concerned about the bug just before she collapsed. Claude explains that the adult insect produces a potent toxin that coats its eggs and larvae. When these small, airborne particles are inhaled, a person becomes infected. Christophe adds that the only people who got sick were the guides who had entered the forest with him, where they must have inhaled the larvae. Claude notes that the prevention method is exactly what Letizia did, covering her mouth and nose with a cloth, a solution that deeply impressed the king. Letizia now understands why the villagers were so terrified. Claude smiles, mentioning that he heard the villagers were kneeling and calling her a goddess, which makes Letizia realize those last moments weren't a dream. Now that the cause is found, Claude thanks Christophe for his work. Letizia also thanks him, telling him she is now fully convinced of his ability. She smiles and says that while she is just a poor lady, she would be very happy to have him as her guard. Christophe accepts, but then steps forward, draws his sword, and kneels. He proclaims that he is Christophe Lanvin, and he doesn't just want to guard her, he wants to offer his loyalty and become her sword. He formally asks her to accept his oath. Letizia is completely shocked, internally screaming as she realizes a knight's oath is a lifetime devotion. Christophe explains he had been searching for a master to serve. During the incident, even as he was losing consciousness, he could hear her powerful voice. He was fascinated that instead of running from a life-threatening situation, she stood her ground to save everyone. Flustered, Letizia looks to Claude for help, overwhelmed by the responsibility. Claude simply says Christophe is serious and she must decide for herself. Christophe pleads for her to let him protect her. Letizia takes a deep breath, recalls her lessons on etiquette, and regains her composure. She formally addresses Christophe Lanvin, stating that she has received and accepted his oath and tells him to use his strength for her. Christophe, looking up with utter devotion, which reminds Letizia of a loyal dog with a wagging tail, asks her to please just call him Christophe. She shyly agrees. Claude claps, cheerfully pointing out that this happy outcome is all thanks to him for making the introduction. With everything resolved, Claude pulls out a bottle of wine for a toast. Letizia's eyes light up, and she asks if she can have just a little, since she worked so hard. Suzanne immediately appears, looking shocked, and flatly tells her, "You can't," reminding her she is still a patient. Letizia groans, but Claude proposes a toast anyway, celebrating Christophe's new oath and the discovery of the Life Eater's cause. As they celebrate, Claude notices one last letter. He reads it aloud, revealing a summons from the king. "Letizia Cherriere, come to the palace at once after you wake up." Lady Letizia and her maid Suzanne standing nervously at the entrance to the audience room in the castle of Alenflau. Letizia gulps, mentally preparing to meet the king who had summoned her by letter. She sighs, wondering where Prince Claude, who had brought the letter, had disappeared to, as he claimed to have other business. She worries about what the king could want, just when she hoped she could finally be lazy. A guard announces Lady Letizia Cherriere and tells her to enter, as His Majesty is waiting. As the large door creaks open, Letizia resolves to be calm and activate her noblewoman mode. Inside the grand hall, Letizia, her father Patrice, and Suzanne all perform a deep bow. Letizia formally offers her sincere greetings, and her father expresses what a great honor it is to be given the opportunity to meet. The king, seated on his throne, chuckles and tells them all to raise their heads, saying there is no need to be so stiff. He then explains that he summoned Letizia to thank her for two specific reasons: for saving his life at the graduation party and for her recent handling of the Life Eater incident. The king elaborates that the country's researchers have now confirmed the cause of the Life Eater and the methods to prevent it. He acknowledges that they still haven't managed to reproduce her cure and that her efforts must have been very difficult, for which he thanks her from the bottom of his heart. Letizia humbly replies that he is too kind and that she is simply satisfied she could be of help to him and save many lives. The king then announces that he is thinking of granting her a reward for her service. He asks if there is anything she desires, promising to grant anything within his power. Letizia hesitates, her mind racing. She had already suggested a Medal of Honor would be enough, but she privately has no interest in showing such a thing off. She briefly thinks about asking for a year's supply of wine but dismisses the thought as improper for a duke's daughter. Suddenly, she remembers her most important wish and, apologizing for her impertinence, she makes her request. She asks His Majesty to officially recognize the annulment of her engagement to Prince Dion. She explains that while Prince Dion declared it annulled, the matter has been put on hold because the king refuses to accept it. The king's expression darkens as he asks if this is truly her wish or just an attempt at atonement. He warns her that recognizing the annulment means he must also recognize her alleged crimes. Letizia confirms she understands, stating it was all due to her own depravity. At that moment, the door creaks open, and Prince Claude's voice remarks that they seem to be doing something fun. He and Prince Dion enter the room, shocking Letizia. Dion slams the door and angrily tells his father he is in the middle of an audience, but Claude cheerfully suggests they join in. He explains that he anticipated they would reach this exact deadlock about the annulment and figured they might need a helping hand. Dion demands to know what Claude means, while the king sighs in exasperation. Dion then speaks up as a concerned party, declaring that he wants to make Anna his fiancée as soon as possible. Letizia is inwardly terrified, wondering how Claude could have predicted her actions so perfectly. Claude then poses a question to the king. Doesn't he find it strange that Letizia would so easily agree to her own one-sided annulment? Claude grins at Letizia, telling her they won't get anywhere if she keeps her secret, so he will explain everything. Letizia, though shocked, realizes he is right. As long as the king refuses the annulment, the threat of civil war remains, so it is better to tell the truth. Claude then reveals the truth to the room. Letizia had discovered the ducal trio was planning a civil war and, to prevent it, she purposefully harassed Lady Anna. This was all a complex plan to manipulate Prince Dion into annulling their engagement. Dion immediately explodes, shouting that Claude is lying and angrily recalling how she made Anna cry and abused him. The king, absorbing this new information, asks Letizia if this claim is true. She quietly confirms that it is. Claude tells his brother it is not a lie, and Letizia elaborates that what Claude said is essentially true. She admits that while she was motivated by a desire to prevent war, she regrets moving forward with her plan on her own. She also apologizes to Prince Dion, saying she had always intended to be his supportive partner and is sorry she lacked the strength to be one. The king tells Letizia to raise her head, stating that he completely recognizes the great efforts she made and that he and his son were the foolish ones for not seeing the truth. This causes Dion to protest. The king muses that he is unsure what to do, as he questions Dion's future without Letizia. This angers Dion, who asks if his father is refusing the annulment because he believes Dion cannot rule alone. The king bluntly replies, "Precisely." He tells Dion he has a tendency to ignore advice and make decisions based on his own warped sense of justice, which is why he felt Letizia was indispensable for his rule and why he doubts Lady Anna could fulfill the same role. Dion is left speechless. The king then turns back to Letizia, saying that while he wishes to grant her request, the annulment of the first prince's engagement cannot be announced so easily. He asks for time to put his thoughts in order and requests that she wait, to which Letizia agrees. The king says good, and dismisses them. Outside the room, a tired Letizia sighs in relief. Suzanne is waiting with the carriage, and Prince Claude is also there to congratulate her. When Letizia sees the carriage, she is shocked to find it piled high with goods. Suzanne smiles, asking if there's a problem, and Letizia, also smiling, confirms all the items are hers. Suzanne playfully asks if she plans to eat and drink it all herself, but Letizia defends her shopping, explaining that there are things she can only buy in the capital. Claude sighs that the horse can't possibly pull the load and says they'll have to reduce it, adding that he'll accompany her until she leaves the city. Inside the carriage, Claude begins tossing some of her purchases out the window to lighten the load, much to Letizia's horror. He then asks her how it feels to be back in the capital, but her attention is caught by a dismal-looking area outside, and she asks him what that place is. Claude's expression turns serious as he identifies it as the slums, a place where the poor, orphans, and homeless end up. He explains that it's ravaged by seasonal epidemics that kill many people, leading to a vicious cycle where the decreasing population weakens the country and creates even more poverty. Letizia asks what kind of illnesses they are. Claude explains there are two types, one in the rainy season that causes diarrhea and nausea, and one in the winter that involves head and throat aches. Letizia's past life medical knowledge immediately identifies these as food poisoning and an infectious virus, like the flu. She surmises the poor hygiene standards in the slums are the cause and believes improving hygiene could stall the diseases. She asks Claude if it would be possible to provide soap to the people, explaining that hand washing could significantly reduce infections. Claude immediately dismisses this, pointing out that soap is an expensive luxury good and the royal coffers would run out trying to provide it. As Letizia hesitates, Suzanne speaks up. She suggests using kochi nuts, a nut commoners use for washing by crushing it and mixing its sap with water. Letizia's face lights up, and Claude agrees it's a good idea, as the nuts are cheap and abundant. Claude then smiles, noting that she seems very motivated, which he finds reassuring. Letizia giggles, thinking to herself that if she can reduce epidemic deaths, she will strengthen the country, fulfill her promise to Claude, and finally achieve her super-duper lazy lifestyle. She also reflects that protecting people is a wish carried over from her past life. Just as she's celebrating, Suzanne asks the practical question of how she plans to spread the practice of hand washing. Letizia pauses, admitting it might be difficult, but then an idea strikes her, and she declares she knows a good way in Frenit village, where Tet is seen running hard. He's hurrying towards Sister Letizia, and as he gets close, he rattles something and eagerly asks her how the plan went, wanting to know if everyone washed their hands properly. Letizia smiles warmly and confirms that the success is all thanks to Tet. She happily notes that even though a few people still slack off, many more are now participating in the hand-washing, which makes Tet cheer. Letizia looks pleased, thinking to herself that she was right after all, as this job is perfectly suited for children who treat it like a fun game. Standing nearby, Prince Claude remarks that her plan to get people into the habit of washing their hands seems to be going very well. Letizia, standing proudly with Tet, reminds the prince that she told him she had a good plan. This all began a month earlier, as a flashback shows Tet looking up. Letizia had just learned about the state's poverty and disease rates after an audience at the palace. She had immediately traveled to Frenit village to test her new policies for improving hygiene, which is when Tet approached her asking for a moment of her time. In the flashback, Letizia asks the young boy who he is, and he cautiously introduces himself as Tet. Letizia smiles, sits down, and introduces herself as Letizia. She then asks Tet if he could take her to his house, explaining that she has a small favor to ask. She quickly clarifies that she will, of course, need to have a discussion with his mom first. Letizia follows Tet as he runs, and she second-guesses her direction, thinking he seems a bit suspicious. Tet stops and points, saying his house is this way. Letizia sighs in relief and thanks him. As Tet runs ahead, Letizia's maid asks her milady why she approached that specific child instead of any other children in the village. Letizia explains that she had actually heard about him from the village chief. The chief had told her that the child lost his father a few years ago and that his mother is sick in bed. The other villagers try to help them, but their life is still very tough. They are so poor they aren't even able to attend banquets, as they have no food to contribute. Hearing this, Letizia decided that she wanted to help them, even just a little bit, a sentiment her maid finds wonderful. They arrive at the house, and Tet opens the door with a click, calling out to his mom about the people who have arrived, while one of Letizia's attendants confirms, "It's here." Inside, Tet's mother is bowing deeply on the floor, frantically apologizing and asking if her child did something wrong. She begs for their pardon, explaining that they are poor and have nothing to offer for forgiveness if they made a mistake. Letizia kindly asks her to please lift her head. She introduces herself as Letizia Cherriere and explains that she has come to ask Tet to do some work for her. The mother is confused, asking work. Letizia explains that she wants Tet to work for a new policy in Duke Cherriere's territory. The mother, still bewildered, asks what her child could possibly do. Letizia reassures her that it's a simple thing, he just needs to walk around the village and remind people of certain things. She adds that, of course, they will also provide a reward for this work. The scene flashes to Tet performing his new job. He is seen stopping a man, telling him he can't go inside his house yet because he first needs to wash his hands with kochi nuts. Elsewhere, he checks on a woman cooking over a sizzling fire, asking if she is using the correct amount of heat, and she confirms that it should be okay. Tet is shown being strict as people ask him questions, admitting they are no match for him. Back in the present, Prince Claude observes that Tet seems quite used to his job now, which Letizia confirms, as her attendant notes she asked Tet to help. Prince Claude then turns to Letizia, saying he has to thank her as well. The scene shows Tet dutifully overseeing hand-washing and cooking. The prince explains that he was the one who suggested giving Tet some authority. He had worried that people might ignore a child, so he proposed making Tet a personal hygiene ambassador from the Duke's house, which clearly had an effect. Letizia's maid thinks about how Tet learned everything enthusiastically, even though she initially thought the job would be too difficult for a child. Tet pipes up, "That's right, sister." And the prince concludes that it's going well simply because people are weak to official titles. Tet, looking bright and happy, tells Letizia that thanks to the job she gave him, he has been able to buy food and medicine for his mom. He excitedly shares that lately, his mom is able to stay awake a lot more than she could before. Letizia smiles, telling him, "That's good," and Tet laughs. He then runs off, announcing that he is going to inspect again. Letizia watches him go, clenching her fist and thinking that they've made a good start. She considers how they might spread this policy to other territories and countries. Suddenly, villagers begin running up, and one man shouts, "Hey! Everyone, it's the goddess Dash." Others join in, calling her goddess, and thanking her for saving them during the Life Eater case. They also spot her companions, referring to Prince Claude as the attendant, and recognizing Mr. Christophe and Miss Maid. Prince Claude looks away, muttering that he's just an attendant. The villagers, cheered on by children, declare that since the goddess's friends are here, they must throw a party and continue where they left off before. Letizia tries to protest, yelling, "Wait a minute, Dash," but the villagers are already decided and run off to prepare the celebration. A lively party soon begins, with tables of food and drink. Letizia is seen with two happy children, thinking that she is thankful for their hospitality, but she lets out a sigh. She truly wishes they would stop calling her goddess. Exhausted, she leans against a large barrel with a thud, thinking, "I'm tired." Prince Claude finds her there, remarking, "So you're here in a place like this, goddess?" Letizia, annoyed, asks if His Highness could please stop calling her that as well. The prince gestures to the party, saying it's important to see things from a citizen's perspective. He then teases her, asking how she could hide her identity and claim to be a mere attendant, calling it an appalling thing to do. He asks why she isn't proud of her title. He then grows serious, observing that the village is clearly flourishing, as they've overcome the beast damage and can now afford this party. Letizia agrees but adds, "That's true, but," before stating that she still believes his elder brother, Dion, should become the king. She explains that while her father, the Duke, is doing his best, there are still poor people like Tet's family. This poverty is a big problem across the whole country. She worries that if her brother, who knows nothing of towns like these, inherits the throne, the country will continue to decline. She concludes that the future king needs to be able to think more about the citizens. As Prince Claude listens, Letizia contrasts herself with her brother, musing that maybe she would be a better choice since she is more calculating. However, she admits that she does not have the nobleness that he possesses. As she says, "That's why," Prince Claude thinks about his brother. He agrees that Dion is too upright, which makes him inflexible. But, he reflects, this uprightness also means Dion holds a stronger sense of justice than others, which is the very nobleness a king should have. Letizia firmly states that her job is to support her brother, the future king. She declares that this is what she believes and she doesn't care what she needs to do or experience to make that happen. As Letizia's maid watches, she thinks about Prince Claude. She reflects that while his usual behavior doesn't make him seem like a prince, he is a respectable member of the royal family who always takes the country and his brother, Dion, into account. Prince Claude tells Letizia that there's a limit to what he can do alone. He says it reassured him when someone like her noticed the potential for a civil war and planned to stop it. He offers her his gratitude, saying her support has been amazing. He praises her for the Life Eater case and the hand-washing plan, admitting she can come up with things that he cannot. Letizia is flustered by his words, and her heart pounds. She thinks, "I feel weird dash," wondering if it's because he's acting different than usual. She internally pleads for him not to tease her. As he leans closer, her heart pounds again and he tells her, "To me, are like a goddess." Just then, the scene shifts, and an attendant hands over a report, asking them to look at it. The report shows that the spread of the epidemic inside Cherriere's territory is much smaller than in other territories. Back at the estate, Letizia reflects that the policy she started in Frennet village has now spread all over the territory. She finds this wonderful and thanks everyone's efforts. She had been worried about an epidemic during the rainy season, but the policies regarding kochi nuts and firewood for cooking have clearly had an effect. She asks her attendant, Donnie, about the financial support for the villages. Donnie confirms that he has already received approval from the master, the Duke, and that preparations can begin. Letizia's maid notes that if the epidemic death rate decreases, crop production will naturally increase, which is a relief since their land is already abundant. She concludes that all that's left is to spread the policy across the entire country. Letizia agrees and decides to discuss this with Prince Claude immediately. Just then, the maid presents a letter, explaining that His Highness's messenger just delivered it. Letizia opens it, wondering what it's about. She reads the letter from Prince Claude. He congratulates her on the policy's success but warns that there are issues with spreading it nationally. He explains that her influence is growing, and people in the capital are also calling her the goddess of Allenflow for saving his father and her own territory. Because of this, combined with her unannulled engagement to his brother Dion, the ducal trio are furious. He warns that if things continue, the civil war they feared will definitely happen. Letizia sighs, frustrated that the policy, while successful, is somehow backfiring on her. She wonders why His Majesty the King still refuses to acknowledge the annulment, even though he should be aware of the looming civil war. She suspects he can't let go of the desire to have her as the crown princess, despite knowing that Prince Dion wishes to have the Baron's daughter, Lady Anna, as his consort. Letizia thinks of Lady Anna, wondering what she's doing, as she hasn't seen her since the graduation party. Letizia reflects guiltily that she did many bad things to Anna, even if it was for the country's sake. Suddenly, her maid calls her name and warns her to be careful. Letizia is confused, but the maid explains she senses a disturbance downstairs and that someone is coming up the stairs. An attendant outside the room is heard yelling, "Please wait. You cannot enter dash." The door bursts open with a bam, and Letizia looks on in shock. Lady Anna stands in the doorway, smiling brightly. She says, "It's been a while, Lady Letizia," and wishes her a good morning. Letizia is stunned, thinking, "Lady Anna, and why?" She quickly composes herself, thinking she must enter lady mode. Anna continues, saying there is something she wishes to discuss and asks for her time. Letizia, now perfectly composed, smiles and asks how she may be of assistance. Letizia comments that it's a bit rude to arrive without an appointment. Anna apologizes but states that she assumed Letizia would have refused her request anyway. Anna's expression turns serious, and she says she will be blunt. "I want to know your real identity." Letizia is completely dumbfounded, asking what she means. She thinks to herself that she is just Letizia Cherriere and that her secret plans for a lazy life don't count as a real identity. Anna cuts her off, telling her not to play dumb. She says it's weird for Letizia to have knowledge that doesn't exist in this world. Anna lists the technique used to save the king and the hand-washing policy as examples. At that moment, Letizia has a shocking realization. She inwardly panics, thinking, the real identity that Lady Anna is talking about, is it about my past life's memories? As this thought hits her, Anna leans in and demands, "Please tell me, Lady Letizia." In a final gag panel, Prince Claude appears, clearing his throat and announcing, "Next is my story." A chibi version of Letizia flops over, saying, "Then I will slack off." Prince Claude yawning in his bed as birds chirp outside his window. His attendant calls out, "Your Highness," and is shown in the room, urging him to please get up. She reminds him that his lessons at the Nobles Academy will be starting soon. Claude, still lying down, protests that he stayed up late last night and wants to sleep a bit more. The attendant exclaims, "Your Highness," again. Claude introduces himself in his thoughts as Claude Allenflau, the second prince of the country, adding that to society, he is known as the delinquent prince. Later, Claude is shown fully dressed and walking through the academy as other students murmur and whisper about him. They comment that it's His Highness Claude, but it's already noon, and they wonder when he last even attended classes. The students gossip that he was probably out all night messing around and note how carefree he is compared to his brother Dion. Claude simply smirks, thinking to himself that his reputation is pretty much set. He then reveals internally that there is actually a reason why he is like this, and it is all for the sake of something his father wishes to accomplish. A flashback shows Claude's father, the king, explaining a plan to him. The king says that for the sake of Dion and the country, he needs Claude to act like a delinquent and oppose the ways of the imperial family. The king wants Claude to join a group that has information on organizations that oppose the imperial family, explaining that it will be much easier for him to obtain information this way. The king asks if Claude will accept, and Claude, standing respectfully, replies, "Yes, father." Claude reflects that he didn't refuse because he always thought his brother would be a more fit king and he was happy that he could be of use to the country. The flashback continues, showing Claude in a shadowy setting as he recalls his secret work. He reflects that he felt accomplished being able to assist the royal family behind the scenes, and because of that, he didn't mind what others thought of him, or at least, that's what he had thought. As his father planned, a man who wanted to rebel against the imperial family eventually reached out to him. This man believed Claude was unsatisfied with the current ruling and ended up exposing all his plans. To maintain his cover, Claude also started spending his nights out, playing with various women, and took on other tasks, like sneaking into the mansions of nobles. The scene then shows him with Letizia, who reports that she will now do her best to spread the hand-washing policy, and Claude tells her that he'll leave it to her. In the present, Letizia is seen slumping over, remarking that the difference between Claude's two personalities is quite shocking. Claude, looking serious, asks if she is looking down on him, but Letizia quickly insists she meant it in a good way. The narrative notes that Letizia, who is supposed to be the pinnacle of ladies, is quite different from what one would expect. She is shown calling out, "Susanna, bring me some more snacks," while her maid, Susanna, asks if it isn't too early for snacks. As their meeting concludes, Letizia says it's fine since His Highness is here, and the narration explains that she is currently helping Claude with a variety of things. Letizia then tells Claude that she was shocked, too, because the rumors about him were false and he is actually both level-headed and intelligent. Claude, holding a teacup, looks at her and says that he never knew she cared so greatly for this country. Letizia gets flustered by his comment and asks if something is wrong. Claude simply replies, "No." Later, while they are having snacks, Letizia exclaims, "Ah dash," as she was going to eat a particular snack, but Claude takes it first, telling her it's already his and he isn't handing it over. As they bicker, Claude reflects in a large thought bubble that he had said he didn't care what others thought of him. He admits, however, that having someone who knows the real him feels really good. He then looks at Letizia and says that he will be counting on her from now on. The extra chapter concludes with a full-page chibi drawing of Letizia dressed as a nurse, holding a syringe and a clipboard. Letizia's current situation. It explains that Letizia Cherriere plotted to annul her engagement with the first prince, and after the prince ordered the annulment, the second prince, Claude, asked for her help in protecting the country. She has been secretly using her memories from a past life as a nurse in Japan to help, such as when she saved the king's life. While she was aiming for a super-duper lazy lifestyle, and their plans were making steady progress, she is now confronted by Lady Anna, who is demanding to know her real identity. Letizia is shown looking shocked, thinking to herself that she is in serious trouble. Back in the present, Letizia sits at her desk facing Lady Anna. She requests that her attendants, Suzanne, Donnie, and Christophe, all withdraw from the room. She explains that she wishes to converse with Lady Anna alone. Suzanne looks worried and begins to object, but Letizia gives her a bright, reassuring smile. She tells them it's fine and promises that should something happen, she will be sure to call for them immediately. Her attendant, Honey, says, "Very well," as they all file out and the door slams shut. Once alone, Letizia decides that she must first try to deceive Anna, as she is still unsure of her intentions. She calmly asks if Anna is referring to the new hand-washing policy or the technique she used to save His Majesty. Letizia, sitting gracefully, then lies, claiming she acquired such knowledge by studying books from the House Cherriere library. She asks if this explanation is sufficient to assuage Anna's doubts. Anna, however, looks unconvinced, thinking to herself, "That can't be." Anna then stands and demands that Letizia show her those books. Letizia, feigning offense, replies, "Excuse me," and asks why she would possibly need to show Anna her family's precious library. Letizia then stands up and angrily swats her fan, confronting Anna more directly. She demands to know what Anna means by chattering on about ridiculous things like her real identity and knowledge that shouldn't exist in this world. Anna stumbles back with an irk, as Letizia accuses her of wasting her precious time with such ludicrous matters and asks if Anna even knows her place. This barrage causes Anna to mutter to herself in frustration. She thinks about how, just like the game's storyline, she was supposed to have a happy ending with Prince Dion, but no matter how much time passes, their engagement annulment won't go through. She puzzles over how Letizia, who was supposed to be the villainess, is instead being called a goddess. Anna concludes that the only possible reason is that Letizia has become a different person, and she is asking these questions because the whole situation is just too weird. Suddenly, Anna becomes overwhelmed with emotion and cries out. She laments that even though she was able to reincarnate into the world of an Otome game, she would have been happier in Japan if she knew things would turn out like this. As Anna gasps, realizing her slip-up, Letizia just stares, completely blank and holding her fan to her face. Letizia quietly says, "Lady Anna," and Anna quickly tries to recover, insisting, It's nothing," while Letizia continues to stare. Letizia gasps, her mind racing. She thinks, did she just mention reincarnation and Japan? To test her theory, Letizia calmly lists a few specific words: Mount Fuji, Tokyo Tower, automobiles. Anna gasps in shock and immediately shouts, "Lady Letizia? Why do you know those words dash?" Seeing this reaction, Letizia's suspicion is confirmed. Letizia stares intently at Anna, thinking that, just as she thought, Lady Anna is a reincarnated person from Japan who also possesses her past life memories. Letizia puzzles over the new term she heard: otome game? Storyline? Villainous. She notes that she never played such games in her past life, so she doesn't know the concepts well, but she understands they must be related to this world. Anna, meanwhile, is overjoyed and exclaims, "My! So you do know of these words." Letizia decides that her best course of action is to probe and find out exactly what Anna knows, so she resolves to put on a little act. Letizia puts her hands to her chest and feigns surprise. "You?" When Anna asks, "Is that so?" Letizia enthusiastically replies, "Yes." She then spins a lie, claiming these are sacred words that have been transcribed in ancient texts and passed down in her family for generations, all while thinking to herself, "Sorry, it's all lies." Letizia then glances at Anna and presses her advantage, saying that only those within House Cherriere should know them. She pointedly asks, "Why do you know of these sacred words, Lady Anna?" Anna is flustered and stammers, "Kiss." Letizia slides her hand across the desk and leans in, asking, "Don't tell me." "Lady Anna, are you hiding something?" Which makes Anna reply, "What dash?" Letizia softens her approach, first apologizing for claiming Anna's words made no sense. She then says that Anna appears to be greatly troubled by something and offers to gladly hear her out if she is willing to share. Letizia gently squeezes Anna's hand and adds that if this is of utmost importance to House Cherriere, she needs Anna to tell her. Anna gulps and finally relents, saying, "You might not believe me, but dash." Anna then explains everything. She reveals that she has memories of a past life from before she was born as Anna. In that life, she lived in a country called Japan and loved things called otome games. She describes how in the game, the heroine is a baron's daughter named Anna who pursues romances with various capture targets. These targets include the completely perfect Dion, the sexy bad boy Claude, and the silent knight Christophe. Then, there is the villainess, a character who bullies Anna, and her name was Letizia. Anna continues, explaining that one day she realized this world was identical to that otome game and that she had reincarnated as the heroine, Anna. She was ecstatic and decided to aim for a happy ending with Dion, as marrying him after overcoming the villainess was the most popular route. But things went wrong. Letizia, who should have been the villainess, somehow gained the nickname Goddess. On top of that, no matter how much time has passed, Letizia is still engaged to Prince Dion. Anna concludes that since the storyline wasn't proceeding as expected, she became uneasy and came to investigate Letizia, suspecting she was the reason for the changes. Letizia listens to all of this and thinks, I see. She summarizes the situation in her head, because she recalled her past life and acted in ways that didn't align with the original story, like saving His Majesty and implementing countermeasures against infectious diseases. The original storyline got messed up. Letizia reflects that no matter how similar this world is to a game, to her, it is reality. She only acted as a villainess to prevent a civil war, and she also has a promise to Prince Claude to protect the country. She decides that even after hearing Anna's words, her own future actions will not change. Seeing Letizia's thoughtful silence, Anna gasps and asks, "Are you listening?" Letizia quickly replies, "Yes." Letizia wonders what she should do. She feels that after hearing so much, she has to say something and considers that the quickest way would be to reveal her own past life memories. However, she immediately hesitates. She worries that if rumors about her having past life memories spread, her situation would become even more troublesome. She imagines people chattering, "Goddess, goddess, what did you do in your past life?" and shrieks internally. Letizia twitches, realizing that such a revelation would push her super-duper lazy lifestyle even further out of reach. She thinks about how she never wanted to be called a goddess in the first place. She then compares their goals. Lady Anna wants to marry Prince Dion and be happy, while Letizia wants her annulment finalized, to fulfill her promise to Prince Claude, and to finally live a lazy life. As she stares at Anna, who looks back confused, Letizia thinks, "Wait a second?" An idea suddenly strikes Letizia. She thinks, why not have Lady Anna be the one to popularize the policies? She realizes this is for the sake of both their wishes. If she can use Anna's help, the policies can be spread quickly, which will fulfill her promise to Prince Claude. Then, if His Majesty recognizes Lady Anna's efforts, her own engagement to Prince Dion will be annulled, and Anna's engagement will finally proceed. Letizia excitedly thinks, yes, let's do that. as this means she will finally obtain her super-duper lazy lifestyle. Letizia realizes this is a perfect win-win situation. She also considers that since Lady Anna comes from a baron's house, her family won't obtain a great deal of power through the engagement. This means the balance between the ducal houses will remain the same, and a civil war shouldn't happen. Having decided, Letizia thinks, since it's come to this, let's put on another act. She suddenly grabs Anna's hands, her expression sparkling, and proclaims, "Just as I thought. Lady Anna, you are the true saintess." Anna is stunned and can only say, "Wah." Letizia continues her elaborate act, declaring that it was inscribed in the ancient texts that a young woman with past life memories and knowledge of the sacred words was the saintess destined to save the world. She claims that House Cherriere has been searching for this saintess for generations. Letizia brushes off Anna's otome game concepts as something she can't understand, but says she can see Anna's struggles have been for naught and that she need not worry any further. Letizia then points dramatically, proclaiming that as the saintess who supports the country, Anna will marry Prince Dion and bring about prosperity. Gripping Anna's hands again, Letizia declares that House Cherriere will exert its utmost power to guide Anna on her path. Just then, Suzanne steps back up to the door, calling out, "Milady." A short while later, Suzanne is in the room, clearly worried. She frets that she was beside herself with worry to let Letizia be alone with someone she's had a dispute with, and without a single guard. Letizia calms her, saying, "All is fine, there were no problems." Suzanne then mentions that she heard Lady Anna is capable of using powerful magic. This surprises Letizia, who then recalls Anna saying, "I can use magic, so I do not need an escort," as she was leaving. Letizia just says, "I see," and mentions that letting her go alone was still worrying, so she had Christophe accompany her. Suzanne then asks what Lady Anna wished to discuss, pressing if it was about her real identity. Letizia cringes, and decides to sugarcoat the truth. She shushes her maid and explains that Anna simply wanted to know why she had bullied her, and that she explained everything. Suzanne is relieved to hear that the misunderstandings were cleared up. Letizia, needing a moment, then asks Suzanne to make her some tea as she'd like to take a break. Suzanne agrees and leaves the room. Alone, Letizia leans back, thinking that her saintess act was quite presumptuous, but she's thankful Lady Anna believed her. A small thought bubble shows a chibi Anna, determined to do my best for a happy ending with Prince Dion. Letizia reflects on their conversation. She had revealed the true reason she acted as a villainess, her concern about a civil war, which made Anna exclaim, "Yes, so that was why." Letizia had then asked Anna to strictly enforce the practice of handwashing and popularize wearing masks, gloves, and gowns. Anna had been muttering to herself about this, wondering if it meant there were differences from the game. Letizia, thinking back, is sure it will be fine. She mentally names her new plan the substitution plan. She believes that as long as Anna plays her cards well, she can finally say farewell to her goddess role and get one step closer to her super-duper lazy lifestyle. Letizia sits at her desk and decides that for now, she'll just see how things proceed. She then slides her chair back, noticing the profound silence. She thinks to herself that Suzanne is quite late, as she usually brings the tea right away. Getting up, Letizia walks into the hallway and notes that it's oddly quiet, especially since the servants should be busy preparing dinner. She wonders what happened. She turns a corner and stops in shock. Suzanne is lying collapsed on the floor. Letizia cries out, "Suzanne?" and looks around to see all the other servants are also unconscious. "What happened to everyone dash?" she exclaims. Just then, Letizia feels a wave of dizziness, dash. She wobbles and grips the wall for support, but she slumps to the floor, collapsing with a thud.